Chapter 1. Hawkpaw let out a drowsy purr, enjoying the sensation of warm sunlight on his pelt. He lay curled up at the base of a rock, his dark gray tail wrapped over his paws. His whiskers twitched as he sank deeper into sleep, imagining himself stalking prey among the bushes at the top of the gorge.
Wow!
Hawkpaw startled awake as a bundle of ginger fur landed on top of him, and paws prodded him sharply in the ribs. He breathed in the familiar scent of his littermate, Duskpaw.
Get off me!
Hawkpaw yowled, pushing Duskpaw away as he sat up and shook out his ruffled fur.
What's gotten into you? I was enjoying my nap. Well, it's time to wake up, lazy bones, Duskpaw meowed. Cloudpaw and Pebblepaw and I have come up with the best plan ever.
Still half asleep, Hawkpaw narrowed his eyes in annoyance.
What is it this time? Duskpaw is always bugging me with some amazing plan, and usually it's, hey, we're going to steal some two-leg food.
Since he was a kit, Duskpaw had loved the taste of two-leg prey, and was often willing to do some very silly things to get it.
Honestly, Hawkpaw thought, twitching his whiskers, I think he must have bees in his brain.
Okay, then, Hawkpaw murmured, then stretched his jaws in a massive yawn.
What's this great plan? Pebblepaw saw some two-legs carrying woven twigs to the two-leg green place,
Duskpaw explained, bouncing up and down on his paws, his eyes rounded with excitement.
And you know what that means, right?
Hawkpaw gave a weary sigh.
I saw this coming. Two-leg food.
At the same moment, Duskpaw let out an excited squeal.
Two-leg food! It's been a while since Pebblepaw saw them, he continued. They must be long gone, but their leftovers will still be there.
I think you're going to turn into a two-leg if you're not careful, Hawkpaw teased, grinning. Your fur will get thin, except on top of your head. It'll be all puffed up and messy, and you'll start walking on your hind legs and riding about in monsters.
Don't be a stupid furball, Duskpaw protested. Like that would ever happen. You're so crazy about their food, and it's not even that exciting, Hawkpaw responded. Besides, how do you plan on getting away without Wasp Whisker finding out? Not to mention Billy, Storm, and Plumwillow. They won't like their apprentices sneaking off without permission.
Ebony Claw would rip my pelt off if I was idiotic enough to join you.
They won't find out,
Duskpaw mewed with a dismissive wave of his tail.
All the warriors have stuffed themselves with fresh kill, and now they're snoozing at the bottom of the rock pile, just like you were a moment ago. We're going straight there, and we'll be right back, before our mentors even wake up to miss us.
Hawkpaw noticed that his sister, Cloudpaw, and the speckled white she-cat Pebblepaw were standing a few tail lengths away, just out of earshot. Pebblepaw was scraping impatiently at the ground, clearly tired of waiting for Duskpaw.
Get a move on,
she spat.
Let Hawkpaw stay here if he's too much of a scaredy mouse.
Hawkpaw growled deep in his throat at the insult.
Like I'd go if she's going. Look, I know you don't like her,
Duskpaw meowed, lowering his voice and casting a quick glance between Hawkpaw and Pebblepaw.
But you should get to know her better. You know, the two of you are a lot alike. You're both as difficult as a fox in a fit. So are you coming or not?
Hawkpaw let out an irritated hiss at the thought that he was anything like Pebblepaw. She had to be the most annoying cat in the whole clan. She struts around like she's so great, when she's just an apprentice like the rest of us.
No thanks, he snapped. Just leave me alone, okay? Keep your fur on, Duskpaw protested. Your temper will get you into trouble one day.
That made Hawkpaw even more angry, being scolded by the brother who spent so much time messing around.
No, you're the one who'll get into trouble for sneaking out to steal two-leg food.
Duskpaw shrugged, his eyes sparkling with mischief.
It's worth it. Two-leg food is delicious, but you can suit yourself. We're going. Fine, he huffed. Have fun. And good luck explaining when you get back.
Hawkpaw let his annoyance ebb as he watched his brother scuttle off with Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw. He yawned, reflecting thankfully that at least his other sister, Blossompaw, had the good sense not to get involved. Curling up again, he wrapped his tail over his nose and closed his eyes.
Maybe now I can finish my nap in peace.
Some time later, a stiff breeze rustled the branches of the trees at the top of the gorge as Hawkpaw followed the paw steps of his mentor, Ebony Claw, through the undergrowth along the SkyClan border. The sun was dipping down below the topmost branches. Hawkpaw fluffed out his pelt against the sudden chill. Ebony Claw's lithe black figure halted, and she glanced at Hawkpaw over her shoulder. "Wait here while I renew the scent marker," she instructed him. Hawkpaw did as he was told, his ears pricked for the sound of prey. He wondered what had happened to Duskpaw and the others. They hadn't returned from their expedition by the time he and Ebony Claw had left camp. Probably they were so excited by the food that they lost track of time, mouse brains. A secret thrill crept through Hawkpaw at the thought of Duskpaw getting into trouble. He's always fooling around and bending the rules. I love him, but he needs to get serious if he wants to be a warrior. It didn't seem all that fair to Hawkpaw that he always worked as hard as he possibly could, but Duskpaw kept getting away with his stupid behavior. Maybe if he has to deal with the elders' ticks for a few days, he'll decide to make more of an effort. When Ebony Claw returned from setting the scent marker, she was sniffing the air, a suspicious expression on her face. "Can you smell that?" she asked. Hawkpaw opened his jaws to taste the air, and an unfamiliar scent flowed into his mouth. "Great StarClan! What is that?" he exclaimed. "I don't know." Hawkpaw blinked in surprise. "I thought Ebony Claw knew everything, even if she is just a daylight warrior." "Do you think there's some new kind of animal near the gorge?" he asked, trying not to let his voice quiver with the sudden apprehension he felt. "There could be," Ebony Claw replied. "I've picked up this scent once or twice before, near the place where my two legs put their rubbish, but this is the first time I've caught it on our territory." "What are we going to do?" Ebony Claw's ears twitched. "Nothing for now. You can't fight a scent. But we'll report it to Leaf Star and tell all the others to be on the lookout for a strange animal. You never know. It might not be dangerous. Stinking like that, it can't be good." Hawkpaw was drawing in more of the tainted air, trying to commit the scent to memory, when he noticed another smell, something strange and bitter, that made his nose wrinkle. Glancing at Ebony Claw, he saw that she had her ears perked up and her nose stuck in the air. "What's that? Another animal?" he asked. Ebony Claw shook her head. "I think it's fire, but I hope it isn't." She sniffed the air again. "It must be coming from the two-leg place. They're such mouse brains, they always like to start fires to stick their food into. We should go check it out to make sure they have it under control. Follow me." Anxiety fluttered in Hawkpaw's belly like a whole nest full of birds. "That's where Duskpaw and the others went. Will they still be there? Surely they would have left by now, right?" Hawkpaw had never seen fire before, but he had heard enough stories from the elders to know that it could be a serious threat. "Will it reach the camp?" he asked, patting alongside Ebony Claw as her paws turned purposefully toward the two-leg place. "Probably not," Ebony Claw reassured him. "The two-leg place is quite away from the gorge, but the scent is quite strong, so it's best to make sure that we'll all be safe." As they emerged from the bushes, Ebony Claw picked up the pace until she and Hawkpaw were racing across the stretch of dry grass that separated their territory from the two-leg place. The scent grew stronger with every paw step, and Hawkpaw's flutter of fear grew stronger too. "I really hope Duskpaw has gone back to camp." To his surprise, Hawkpaw spotted movement in the grass and realized that small creatures, mice and shrews, were pelting through the stems toward them, away from the source of the smell. One mouse practically ran into his paws, then veered away at the last moment. Hawkpaw's jaws watered. "Hey, look, Ebony Claw," he mewed. "Easy prey." "There'll be time for hunting later," Ebony Claw told him, racing on without a pause. "Right now we have to make sure that everything's safe for our clan." As they drew close to the two-leg green place, the air grew thick with a gray swirl that billowed around the two cats. The acrid scent was overwhelming, catching Hawkpaw in the throat so that he had to cough. "Stay back," Ebony Claw warned him. At the heart of the gray swirl, Hawkpaw could just make out a red glow that began to grow as he watched it, reaching up into separate licking tongues. He stared at the scarlet flames as they spat out gray puffs of air. They seemed to be feeding like some greedy animal on a kind of two-leg rock made from flat sticks. Hawkpaw had sometimes seen two-legs sitting on it with their kits, eating the weird food Duskpaw was so crazy about. Now the fire blazed up, crackling orange sparks leaping up into the low-hanging branches of a tree. "Duskpaw! Cloudpaw!" he thought, gazing around in terror as he looked for his littermates. But there was no sign of them. "They must have left by now," Hawkpaw reminded himself. "I wish I could leave too." The gray air was making his eyes sting, and his lungs burned with every breath he took. "Ebony Claw, can we—" he began. Suddenly the gray air swirled again. The wind shifted, blowing harder from the two-leg place. The fire surged, and the low-hanging tree branches burst into flame. For a few heartbeats they blazed. Then with a loud crackle, the lowest branch fell right next to the burning two-leg rock. Ebony Claw let out a gasp and pushed Hawkpaw back. Every muscle in Hawkpaw's body tensed. He had never heard a warrior sound so terrified before, let alone his own mentor. But Ebony Claw's gasp was instantly drowned out by the sound of terrified yowling from beneath the two-leg rock. It was hard to hear over the rushing and crackling sounds of the fire, but the yowling sounded dreadfully familiar to Hawkpaw. "StarClan, no! There are apprentices in there!" Ebony Claw screeched. "Oh no!" Hawkpaw felt as if his belly was dropping out. His littermates were still there, and in grave danger. "Duskpaw! Cloudpaw!" "Stay back!" Ebony Claw snapped, then raced toward the fire and smoke, her belly fur brushing the grass and her tail streaming out behind her. Hawkpaw crouched, staring at her, his claws digging hard into the ground. The shrieking came again, louder than before, and now he could make out separate voices. "Duskpaw, Cloudpaw, and Pebblepaw are all in there!" Ignoring Ebony Claw's order, Hawkpaw sprang forward and hurled himself toward the blaze. "I'm coming!" he yowled. As the smoke thickened around him, Hawkpaw found it hard to see what was going on. The gray tendrils stung his eyes and caught him in the throat. Coughing, he groped his way forward until he spotted Cloudpaw trapped between the burning branch and the two-leg rock. A heartbeat later, he managed to make out Pebblepaw crouching underneath the strange rock, while Duskpaw scrabbled on the ground at the far side of the blazing branch. Guilt flowed over Hawkpaw, hotter than the flames. "I wanted Duskpaw to get into trouble, just a bit, but not for something like this to happen." Then Ebony Claw appeared through the smoke, fighting her way to Cloudpaw's side. Hawkpaw froze for a moment. "Do I try to help Duskpaw or Pebblepaw?" Pebblepaw seemed to be in more danger. Flames had burned through parts of the two-leg rock, and pieces were starting to fall off. Pebblepaw cringed away from them, letting out a wail of terror. Beyond her, Duskpaw was still scrabbling around as if he was trying to get to Pebblepaw. He yowled something. Hawkpaw couldn't hear the words through the roaring of the fire, but when he saw his brother turn his head, he understood. "He wants me to help Pebblepaw." It did look like Pebblepaw was in more danger, but Duskpaw was his kin. "I wish I could ask Ebony Claw for advice, but she's busy saving Cloudpaw." Hawkpaw thought he had been standing motionless for moons, but it couldn't have been more than a few heartbeats before he flung himself through the flames toward Pebblepaw. All his instincts were telling him to run for safety in the other direction. Burning grass scorched his paws, and hot sparks landed on his pelt, but he kept going until he reached Pebblepaw and grabbed her by her scruff. "This way, furball!" he growled through a mouthful of her fur as he dragged her away from the fire and onto a clear patch of grass. Ebony Claw approached as Hawkpaw let Pebblepaw flop to the ground, pushing Cloudpaw in front of her. "But where's Duskpaw?" Hawkpaw couldn't understand why his brother hadn't followed them out of the blaze. Peering through the smoke, Hawkpaw saw that Duskpaw was still where he had been, next to the burning branch, but now he was slumped over, unmoving. A chill of terror gripped Hawkpaw. "Duskpaw!" he yowled. With Ebony Claw at his side, Hawkpaw raced back through the smoke and flames. When they drew closer, Hawkpaw saw that one of his brother's paws was trapped underneath the thicker end of the branch, where the fire still hadn't reached. For a moment, he felt his heart stop, and he couldn't take a breath. Duskpaw wasn't telling me to save Pebblepaw. He was asking me to help him. Together, Hawkpaw and Ebonyclaw thrust at the branch with their forepaws until it rolled off Duskpaw in a billowing cloud of sparks. Then Ebonyclaw grabbed him by his scruff and dragged him out to where they had left Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw. Hawkpaw followed, pushing his littermate from behind. Duskpaw's legs were limp and his head lolled. He didn't seem able to help himself. Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw still lay slumped on the ground, coughing and letting out whimpers of pain. Hawkpaw could see that patches of their fur were scorched, giving off a strong scent of burning. But to his relief, neither of them seemed to have life-threatening injuries. However, Duskpaw was hardly moving. Now and again he would feebly try to lift his head and let out a weak cough, but then he would slip back into unconsciousness. Hawkpaw gazed at him in horror and shook his shoulder with one paw. "Duskpaw! Duskpaw, wake up!" he begged. "What were the three of you doing out here?" Ebonyclaw demanded. Cloudpaw let out a mournful wail. "Duskpaw said we should sneak over here and look for scraps of two-leg food." Hawkpaw couldn't take his eyes off his unconscious littermate. "And I might have been with you if I hadn't said no." He remembered his earlier hope that Duskpaw would get into trouble with a shudder of shame. Ebonyclaw didn't seem to notice. She lashed her tail at Cloudpaw, clearly frustrated. "If Duskpaw told you to jump off the cliff, would you do it?" "I know it was our fault, too," Cloudpaw whimpered. "But when we got here, the fire was just over there in that shiny thing." She pointed with one paw. "The trash can, yes," Ebonyclaw meowed. "And you didn't have the sense to go back to camp and report it?" "It seemed safe enough then," Pebblepaw continued the story. "Duskpaw said that the fire must have driven the two-legs away, because two-legs are scared of everything, but we were brave enough, and we shouldn't let the fire keep us from the best scraps of tasty food. There was stuff under there." Cloudpaw pointed at the two-leg rock, now collapsing into a smoldering heap. "But then the wind shifted and the two-leg rock caught fire, and then the branch fell and trapped us. We never should have listened to Duskpaw," she finished with another miserable wail. "You should have thought of that sooner," Ebonyclaw snapped. "It's too late to feel sorry, and we need to get Duskpaw back to camp so Echosong and Frecklewish can help him." She flattened herself on the ground beside Duskpaw. "Hawkpaw, help me to get him onto my back," she directed. Hawkpaw worked his shoulders under Duskpaw and began to lift him onto the black she-cat's back. Duskpaw revived a little and hooked his claws into Ebonyclaw's fur. When he was settled, Ebonyclaw staggered to her paws and set off slowly back toward camp, with Hawkpaw steadying his brother on one side and Cloudpaw and Pebblepaw limping behind. As they left the two-leg green place, they heard two-leg monsters screeching in the distance, the sound growing closer as the cats trekked across the stretch of grass and into the bushes at the top of the gorge. Gazing anxiously at his brother, Hawkpaw could hardly believe what had happened. "Hang in there, Duskpaw," he whispered. But now Duskpaw's eyes were completely closed, and he didn't respond at all to Hawkpaw's urging. His legs were hanging limply, and he had lost his grip on Ebonyclaw's fur. Hawkpaw could barely manage to steady him and keep him on the black she-cat's back. Hawkpaw felt as if all his strength had leaked out through his paws, and there was a hard knot in his belly, as if he had swallowed crow food. He was sick with guilt. He couldn't believe he'd wished that Duskpaw would get into trouble. Even worse, he could have saved Duskpaw from the fire. But he hadn't. "Did I make the wrong choice saving Pebblepaw first?" he asked himself. "And what if I lose Duskpaw because of it?" Chapter 2. Helping Ebonyclaw carry Duskpaw down the narrow trail into the gorge was one of the hardest things Hawkpaw had ever done. He was terrified that his brother would slip off Ebonyclaw's back and plummet down onto the rocks below, in spite of the black she-cat's careful paw steps and his own desperate efforts to hold Duskpaw still. His heart was pounding and his legs trembling by the time they reached the bottom. Already several cats were clustered at the end of the trail, gazing anxiously upward. The smell of smoke drifted on the air. Hawkpaw guessed that his clanmates were already aware that something was wrong. Duskpaw was completely unconscious when Ebonyclaw let him slide from her back. Hawkpaw couldn't stop staring into his ginger tabby face, desperately searching for some sign of life. He almost expected his brother to wake up and bounce to his paws, explaining that it had all been a joke. Duskpaw is always fooling around.
What happened?
Wasp Whisker thrust his way through the gathering crowd and gazed down at his motionless apprentice, deep concern in his eyes. Billy Storm, Pebblepaw's mentor, was hard on his paws.
Pebblepaw?
His voice was stern.
Where have you been?
Pebblepaw's head was bowed in shame, and it was Ebony Claw who replied.
There's no time to explain now. Some cat fetch Echo Song and Frecklewish, quickly!
Billy Storm turned and left, as more cats bounded up to see what was happening.
Hawkpaw looked around for his mother and father.
He spotted Sandy Nose and Sage Nose, followed almost at once by Tiny Cloud and Fire Fern, but there was no sign of Cherry Tail or Sharp Claw. Every cat was quiet, exchanging dismayed glances.
They know this is bad,
Hawkpaw thought.
Really bad.
Moons seemed to pass before Echo Song and Frecklewish slipped through the crowd to reach Duskpaw's side.
Thanks, Star Clan,
Hawkpaw murmured to himself.
There's a fire at the Two-Leg Green place,
Ebony Claw meowed, before either Medicine Cat could ask a question.
There was so much smoke. Duskpaw breathed in most of it, because he was the last to be saved. We almost lost Pebblepaw too, but Hawkpaw managed to get her out.
Echo Song gave a brisk nod.
Frecklewish, go and get some wet moss and some comfrey and honey to treat the burns,
she ordered. As Frecklewish dashed off, she added,
Ebony Claw, Hawkpaw, lay Duskpaw out on his back.
It took all of Hawkpaw's courage to help his mentor arrange Duskpaw's limp body on the ground. He could barely look at his brother. He seemed so lifeless. Instead, he forced himself to look at Echo Song as she pounced on Duskpaw and began to press his chest rhythmically with her forepaws. From time to time, she would stop to breathe into Duskpaw's mouth from her own. Hawkpaw stared at her face, trying to glean information from her expression. Maybe this was something that looked very bad, but was no big deal to an experienced medicine cat. But all Hawkpaw could tell from gazing at Echo Song was that she seemed gravely serious, intent on her task. Duskpaw still wasn't moving.
What's happening?
Hawkpaw asked at last, unable to stifle the agonized question. Ebony Claw touched his shoulder with her tail tip.
Echo Song is trying to restart Duskpaw's breathing and his heart,
she explained.
Which means his breathing and his heart have stopped,
Hawkpaw realized. He felt again as though a tough piece of crow food was lodged in his belly and he was about to vomit it up. Echo Song went on pushing at Duskpaw's chest, while Hawkpaw watched, barely daring to breathe. Finally, after what seemed like moons, the medicine cat stopped and stepped back, shaking her head. Duskpaw still lay motionless.
You can't give up,
Hawkpaw cried.
What are you doing? You have to save him!
He was aware of all the other cats who were gathered around, staring at him, but no cat spoke. Hawkpaw felt his heart tearing apart, as if a badger were ripping it with powerful claws. He let out a mournful wail, and behind him another cat joined in. Turning, Hawkpaw saw his mother, Cherry Tail, along with his father, Sharp Claw, pressing forward into the circle of cats who surrounded him. Cherry Tail rushed forward and flung herself to the ground beside Duskpaw, burying her nose in his fur. A couple of tail lengths away, Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw were lying on the grass, moaning miserably. Hawkpaw guessed they were beginning to feel the effects of their burns, but they could barely open their eyes. Clearly they weren't aware of what was going on around them.
They don't know yet that Duskpaw is dead.
Sharp Claw stood over his son's body, stony and silent. Then briefly Hawkpaw felt his father's gaze rest on him. But before either cat could speak, Billy Storm reappeared with the clan leader, Leafstar. They joined Sharp Claw and Ebony Claw, and all four cats conferred quietly together. Hawkpaw crept up to his mother and pressed himself closely against her side. He couldn't find any words to comfort her, but he wrapped his tail around her shoulders. Cherry Tail didn't respond, her muzzle still buried in her dead son's fur. Hawkpaw didn't blame her for not letting him console her. He couldn't console himself.
I can't tell her it'll be okay. Nothing will ever be okay again.
By now, Frecklewish had returned with wet moss and the healing honey and comfrey. Echo Song joined her, and the two medicine cats began to dress Cloudpaw's and Pebblepaw's injuries. After a few moments, Frecklewish padded over to Hawkpaw with a bundle of dripping moss in her jaws.
"You have a bad burn on your back,"
she mewed, setting down the moss.
"Keep still and I'll dress it."
Hawkpaw turned to her with the beginnings of a snarl. He hadn't realized that he had been hurt. He still couldn't feel it. All the pain he felt was in his heart.
"I'm okay,"
he meowed to Frecklewish. "Leave me alone."
"No, you're not okay,"
Frecklewish persisted.
"You need to let me—"
Hawkpaw sprang to his paws.
"I said leave me alone!"
he growled with a lash of his tail. At that, Frecklewish backed off, turning to see to Ebony Claw's wounds instead. Echo Song was still tending to Cloudpaw and Pebblepaw. Pebblepaw's parents, Sparrowpelt and Tiny Cloud, along with her littermate, Parsleypaw, had settled down beside her and were trying to comfort her. Hawkpaw turned back to his mother to see that Sharpclaw had joined her and was gently licking her ears. His green eyes were full of sorrow as he pressed himself against his mate's side. Hawkpaw stood alone, staring at his brother's lifeless body. At last, Cherrytail rose to her paws and padded over to Hawkpaw, leaning against him.
"Ebony Claw told us what happened,"
she murmured.
"I'm glad that you're okay. I know you did everything you could to save Duskpaw. It's not your fault that he's dead."
"But Hawkpaw tried to interrupt, knowing very well that it was his fault.
"You're a hero for saving Pebblepaw,"
his mother assured him.
"It was very brave of you to rush into that fire."
Hawkpaw couldn't feel any sense of pride at his mother's words, and when he looked up at his father and saw Sharpclaw's face so full of grief, guilt rushed over him again so strongly that he could hardly stay on his paws. Pain had begun to stab into Hawkpaw from the wound on his back, and he wished that he hadn't told Frecklewish to go away.
"But then, maybe I deserved this pain." "Hawkpaw!"
The voice was Echo Song's as she padded toward him.
"Come back with me to the medicine cat den. You need to rest, and let me see to that wound on your back."
Hawkpaw opened his jaws, but Echo Song gave him no chance to protest. Though she was usually very calm, he knew that she put up with no nonsense from any cat.
"You'll do as you're told," she meowed. "You're just an apprentice, and I'm your medicine cat. When I tell you to come with me, you come."
Too exhausted and heartsick to argue, Hawkpaw bowed his head and followed her. Inside the medicine cat den, Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw were already stretched out asleep in nests of thick moss. Their chests rose and fell rhythmically as they breathed.
"How are they?"
Hawkpaw asked, angling his ears toward the two she-cats.
"They're comfortable," Echo Song replied. "They'll be okay. Their burns aren't as bad as I thought at first. In a few days, they'll be up and about again."
Hawkpaw's relief at hearing Echo Song's reassurance was mingled with even more guilt. Knowing that Pebblepaw wasn't badly hurt reminded him of what he couldn't stop thinking.
What if I had gone to save Duskpaw first? Maybe Pebblepaw's injuries would have been a bit worse, but Duskpaw would still be alive.
After a moment, Hawkpaw became aware that Echo Song was watching him, her green eyes full of understanding, as if she could read his mind. Then she turned and took a poppy seed from the rock shelf where she stored her herbs.
"Eat this,"
she mewed, setting it in front of Hawkpaw.
"It will calm you down, and you have to let me dress the burn on your back."
Hawkpaw wanted to give in. The wound felt small, but it hurt worse than anything he had felt in his life, a clawing pain that made him feel sick.
"No," he decided. "I don't deserve to feel better."
He began to back away from Echo Song, but his body was giving way at last from his injuries and the smoke he had breathed in. He felt his legs buckle and a cloud seemed to swirl around him, blacker than the smoke. As he began to slide into unconsciousness, he felt Echo Song's gentle paws spread something soothing on his back. The medicine cat's voice pulsed in his ears, saying something about a prophecy, but Hawkpaw couldn't make out the words, and in a moment the sound was swamped in his own desperate cry.
"I should have saved him first!"
His voice echoed in his own ears, as he finally drifted into a painful, fitful sleep. Chapter 3. Hawkpaw scrambled to the top of the gorge and slipped into the long grass. The sun had cleared the tops of the trees, but shadows still lay among the rocks and in the undergrowth, and no cat had noticed him leaving the camp. Several days had passed since the fire. The scent of smoke had faded from Hawkpaw's fur, and he could hardly feel the pain of his burn anymore. The vigil for Duskpaw was over, but the tightness in Hawkpaw's chest hadn't eased. He couldn't forget how he had failed to save his brother. "Leafstar will make me a warrior today," he thought. "I should be excited, but I'm not. I feel as if nothing good will ever happen again." His heart was so heavy he could barely carry it. Hawkpaw slid through the bushes until he reached the foot of the tree where Duskpaw had been buried. As he stood over the mound of earth, a wave of guilt and sorrow swept over him. "You shouldn't be there, beneath the dirt," he mewed aloud. He remembered how lively and mischievous his brother had been, and now he was lying still and silent, with soil clotting in his ginger fur. "You should be here with me, about to become a warrior." In the days since Duskpaw died, every cat had kept on telling him how brave he had been to rescue Pebblepaw. But Hawkpaw didn't want to hear that, because it only reminded him of how he hadn't rescued his brother. Not in time, anyway. Hawkpaw stood beside his brother's grave, his head bowed, until he heard Leafstar's voice rising from the gorge, faint with the distance, but still ringing out clearly. "Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath the rock pile for a clan meeting." "Goodbye, Duskpaw," Hawkpaw murmured. "I'll never forget you, and I'll never forget that I could have saved you. I'm so sorry." Then he turned and headed back to the gorge. By the time Hawkpaw had clambered down the trail, the rest of his clan had assembled in front of the rock pile, beside the water that cascaded endlessly out of the black hole beneath the boulders. Leafstar stood on top of the rocks, with her deputy, Sharpclaw, beside her. Blossompaw and Cloudpaw emerged to stand at the front of the crowd of cats, their expressions a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Their mentors, Bouncefire and Plumwillow, followed and halted just behind them, and as Hawkwing padded across the sandy floor of the camp to join them, Ebonyclaw slipped into her place with the others. "Cats of Sky Clan, today we have gathered together for one of the most important events in the life of a clan," Leafstar began, her head raised proudly. "The making of new warriors. Plumwillow, Bouncefire, Ebonyclaw, have your apprentices learned the skills of a warrior, and do they understand the importance of the warrior code in the life of a clan?" "Cloudpaw has worked hard to understand all that," Plumwillow responded. Bouncefire gave a brisk nod. "So has Blossompaw." "And Hawkpaw," Ebonyclaw added. Hawkpaw's heart lurched. "Yes, I worked hard, but what good was that to Duskpaw? I don't deserve this." Leafstar dipped her head approvingly and leaped down from the rock pile to stand in front of the three apprentices. Beckoning with her tail, she summoned Cloudpaw to her. Cloudpaw stepped forward shakily. Hawkpaw knew that, though she was recovering well from her injuries, she still hadn't built up all her strength, and it was hard for her to stand for long. He forced himself to push aside his grief for Duskpaw, knowing that Cloudpaw was grieving for their littermate too, and to focus on what was happening. "This is one of the most important moments of Cloudpaw's life. I don't want to miss it." Standing over Cloudpaw, Leafstar repeated the words that clan leaders had used for season upon season, every time an apprentice was made into a warrior since the first clans were formed. "I, Leafstar, leader of Sky Clan, call upon my warrior ancestors to look down on this apprentice. She has trained hard to understand the ways of your noble code, and I commend her to you as a warrior in her turn." Turning to Cloudpaw, meeting her gaze directly, she continued, "Cloudpaw, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life?" Hawkpaw's heart lurched again as he heard the phrase, "at the cost of your life." "Duskpaw never got the chance to take this oath,"
he reflected. He never got the honor of losing his life to protect his clan. Instead, he lost it trying to get a few scraps of two-legged food. Somehow that makes it worse, and Cloudpaw must be thinking the same thing.
Cloudpaw looked up at her clan leader, pausing for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was fervent as she replied.
I do.
Then by the powers of StarClan, Leafstar went on, I give you your warrior name. Cloudpaw, from this moment you will be known as Cloud Mist. StarClan honors your courage and your resilience, and we welcome you as a full warrior of SkyClan. Leafstar rested her muzzle on the top of Cloud Mist's head, and Cloud Mist licked her shoulder in response.
Cloud Mist! Cloud Mist!
The SkyClan cats yowled, greeting the warrior with her new name. Leafstar waited for the noise to die down, then touched Cloud Mist's shoulder with the tip of her tail. Because of your injuries, she meowed, you need not sit vigil tonight. You still belong in the medicine cat den until you have finished recovering. As every cat murmured agreement, Cloud Mist dipped her head and moved back to sit with her mother, Cherrytail, who gave her ear a proud lick. Next, Leafstar beckoned Blossom Paw to stand in front of her. Hawkpaw listened as the ceremony was repeated, and she was given the name of Blossom Heart. StarClan honors your courage and fighting skill, Leafstar finished, and we welcome you as a full warrior of SkyClan.
Blossom Heart! Blossom Heart!
Looking proud and happy, Blossom Heart licked her clan leader's shoulder and withdrew to stand with her clanmates. Nervousness tingled through Hawkpaw, briefly overcoming even his sorrow for Duskpaw, as he realized that now it was his turn. It wasn't only because every cat's gaze would be on him as he went through the ceremony, but he was suddenly aware that a massive change was hovering over his life, like an eagle about to swoop on its prey. He wasn't a kit anymore, and the prospect of taking his place in his clan as a full warrior was as overwhelming as if the cascade of water from beneath the rock pile had caught him and swept him away. I wish Duskpaw could see this, he thought. He always had a joke to make. I wonder what he would say if he were here now. But Hawkpaw couldn't begin to imagine that, because Duskpaw wasn't there. He was under a pile of earth. He'll never be here again. Hawkpaw knew that being a warrior wouldn't be any fun without his littermate. Hawkpaw padded forward to stand in front of Leafstar. She greeted him with a dip of her head and called on StarClan to look down on him. Then she turned and asked him to take the oath. Hawkpaw, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life? Everything that was in Hawkpaw, his guilt and grief for his brother's death, his determination to honor his memory by becoming the best warrior that he could, surged into his voice as he replied, I do! Then by the powers of StarClan, Leafstar continued, I give you your warrior name. Hawkpaw, from this moment you will be known as Hawkwing. StarClan honors your courage and your bravery, and we welcome you as a full warrior of SkyClan. Courage and bravery, Hawkwing thought. Aren't they sort of the same thing? He wondered whether Leafstar thought that there was only one good thing about him. And am I really even that brave? As the clan acclaimed him by his new name, Hawkwing felt his pelt prickle under some cat's gaze and spotted Sharpclaw staring at him. Ever since Duskpaw's death, Sharpclaw had been cold, and though he had never said as much, Hawkwing knew that his father blamed him just as he blamed himself. He raised his head to look directly at Sharpclaw and knew that he was thinking of Duskpaw, too. Duskpaw, who would never have another name, who would never be anything but dead. Cherrytail padded over to the three new warriors, nuzzling each of them in turn. Congratulations, she meowed. I'm so proud of you. But Hawkpaw felt a fresh pang of pain to see the sadness in his mother's eyes. And when Sharpclaw leaped down from the rock pile to join them, he stood by silently and scarcely looked at Hawkwing. Hey, Hawkwing! At the sound of his name, Hawkwing felt a tiny flicker of pride. It was the first time any cat had really used the new name. Then he turned and his heart grew cold as he saw that the cat speaking was Pebblepaw. Since the fire, Hawkwing had barely spoken to her. He could hardly stand to look at her. She's always so cocky and arrogant and pleased with herself. And he realized that she seemed different now from how she had been before the fire. Since then, she hasn't made a single snarky remark to me.
I want to thank you for rescuing me,
she meowed, a look of genuine gratitude in her eyes.
I was trapped, and you saved my life. What Leafstar said about you is true. You really are brave and courageous. I'm so happy to be alive, and it's all because of you.
Hawkwing stared at her, unsure how to respond. He noticed that she still had a poultice of honey and comfrey on one of her paws, but apart from that, she looked as strong and healthy as ever. She's doing much better than Cloud Mist. Somehow the realization made anger throb through Hawkwing from ears to tail tip. He tried to choke out, "You're welcome," because he knew that was what he was supposed to say. But his throat felt as if it was full of ash, and his anger rose until he felt it must burst out of him. How dare she stand there looking so healthy and happy when my brother is dead? Hawkwing didn't feel proud of his warrior name anymore. He didn't even feel sad about Duskpaw. Everything within him had been overwhelmed by his fury. "I wish I hadn't saved you," he blurted out. "I wish I'd gone for my brother first. Then maybe he'd still be alive." The gratitude in Pebblepaw's face drained away, and her eyes widened in dismay. For a moment she looked crushed. Then her gaze hardened as she stared at Hawkwing, and she shook her head. Without another word, she spun around and stalked away. Chapter 4. The dawn patrol had left some time before, and the red glow in the sky told Hawkwing that the sun had risen, though its rays had not yet cleared the top of the gorge. Shivering, he shook out his pelt and rose to his paws to arch his back in a long stretch. The night of his vigil was almost over. His sister, Blossomheart, a few tail lengths away, had started to groom herself, licking one paw and passing it over her face. After a moment she paused and parted her jaws in a massive yawn.
"I could sleep for a moon,"
she whispered. New warriors guarding the camp were not supposed to speak to each other, but on the night before when they started their vigil, Hawkwing had been unable to resist murmuring a few words into his sister's ear. "I miss Duskpaw so much. I wish he could be keeping vigil with us."
"I miss him too,"
Blossomheart had responded.
"He should be here."
After that, there was nothing to do but keep watch for invaders, and since no invaders appeared, Hawkwing had the whole of the night to sit and think. Now, as the red sun peeked over the rim of the gorge, he was beginning to feel guilty about the way he had treated Pebblepaw. The thought of her still filled him with despair and anger, but now he began to wonder if it was unfair to blame her for the decision he had made and the way he felt now. "It was my choice," he told himself. "My responsibility." Even so, his guilt over exploding at her was only one drop in the vast pool of guilt that was his heart. As the whole circle of the sun appeared above the cliff, warriors began to emerge from their den, stretching before making their slow way down the trails. Leafstar appeared from her den and beckoned some of her cats around her, speaking quickly. "I wonder what all that's about," Hawkwing thought drowsily. A moment later the group dispersed, the warriors heading more purposefully to the bottom of the gorge. Sandy Nose broke from the group and walked up to Hawkwing and Blossomheart. "Your vigil is over," the light brown Tom announced. "Come and join the others by the rock pile. Leafstar is calling a clan meeting." "Another one?" Hawkwing was puzzled. "Why? We all just met yesterday for the warrior ceremony." The rest of the clan began to gather around as Leafstar leaped up to the top of the rock pile. She was followed by Sharpclaw, and also, Hawkwing noticed with a prickle of curiosity, by Echo Song the medicine cat. "Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath the rock pile for a clan meeting," Leafstar yowled. One or two remaining warriors stuck their heads out of their den, then hurried down the trail to join their clanmates. Harvey Moon, MacGyver, and Ebony Claw, the daylight warriors, appeared at the top of the cliff and leaped from rock to gather with the others.
"I'm glad we left early," MacGyver panted as he raced past Hawkwing and Blossomheart. "We might have missed this."
Birdwing appeared at the entrance to the nursery with Mintfur and Honeytail, all three she-cats looking down at their leader on the rock pile. Birdwing's kits frisked around her paws, sometimes getting perilously close to the edge of the trail until their mother gathered them closer with a sweep of her tail. Pebblepaw and Parsleypaw poked their heads curiously out of the apprentice's den, then bounded down to the bottom of the gorge and found a place to sit close to the edge of the river. Finally, the Dawn Patrol, Tinycloud, Sparrowpelt, and Bellapaw returned, appearing at the far side of the gorge and making their way down into the crowd of cats. When all the clan was assembled, Leafstar began to speak, her amber gaze traveling over her cats. Hawkwing thought that he could detect trouble in her eyes, and his pads pricked with apprehension.
"Echo Song received a prophecy from StarClan a few sunrises ago," the brown and cream-colored she-cat meowed. "It will affect the whole future of our clan. I have thought deeply about this, and I feel that it is time to share her vision with you."
She took a step back and waved her tail as a sign for Echo Song to speak. The silver tabby medicine cat hesitated, her gaze seeming fixed on something far away. Then she gave her pelt a brisk shake.
"A few days ago, I went to the Whispering Cave to speak with the spirits of our warrior ancestors," she began. "A pale gray Tom appeared to me in a dream. I had never seen him before, but he told me that his name was Skystar, and he was the ancient founder of our clan."
Hawkwing caught his breath. How many seasons must have passed since SkyClan first came to be, and yet a clan leader could still appear out of the far past to speak to their medicine cat?
"Skystar told me, the fire has burned out, but to dispel the darkness, you must find the spark that remains,"
Echo Song meowed.
"And what does that mean?"
Sharpclaw asked with an irritated twitch of his tail.
"I believe that the fire that has burned out must refer to Firestar, the great leader of ThunderClan,"
Echo Song responded. "Firestar, who restored SkyClan after we were scattered and almost destroyed?" Hawkwing thought, his wonder growing. Firestar, who was Ravenpaw's friend? Every kid knows that story. The concern in Leafstar's expression grew deeper.
"I don't want to believe that Firestar is dead," she murmured.
Echo Song dipped her head sadly.
"I don't see what else Skystar's words could mean," she continued. "And if that's true, then the spark that remains could well be Firestar's kin in ThunderClan. That must mean that we're being told to seek out ThunderClan, and perhaps the other clans too. Perhaps it's time for SkyClan to go home."
"Really?" Sharpclaw lashed his tail. Hawkwing could see how much he hated Echo Song's suggestion. "And just how do you suggest we do that? We know that the clans have moved away from where they lived when Firestar came to us. How are we supposed to find them now?" Echo Song remained calm in the face of the deputy's objection.
"I doubt StarClan would send us on a journey we could not complete," she mewed. "We can seek out Barley, the farm cat who was Ravenpaw's friend, and ask him if he knows where the clan's camps are now."
"That's exactly what we should do,"
Bellapaw called out from where she sat at the foot of the rock pile.
"Barley will be glad to help,"
her brother Rileypaw agreed. "They're Barley's kin," Hawkwing thought. "They know him better than any cat. But even if he can help us, is this really what we're being asked to do?" Silence fell among the clan, the cats exchanging glances of mingled confusion and dismay. Hawkwing felt as bewildered as his clanmates. "StarClan can't possibly mean to send us wandering away from here. The gorge is our home. Why would we want to leave it?" Leafstar had stepped forward again and was about to speak when the silence was broken by Sage Nose.
"This is all very well," he declared, "but surely there is a simpler answer. This prophecy must be about the fire that just happened. It can't be a coincidence that the fire broke out at the same time that Echo Song had her vision.
"Maybe there's something left over at the two-leg green place where the fire happened,"
Plumwillow suggested.
"Maybe Skystar wants us to find it."
Echo Song shook her head.
"It's true that I had the vision on the same day that the fire happened, but
Was StarClan predicting the fire? Nettlesplash asked, leaping to his paws.
Hawkwing felt as though a rock had plummeted out of an empty sky and landed on top of him. Sharpclaw let out a low growl.
Quiet down, all of you, and let Echo Song finish.
The clan obeyed him, though there was still a stir of movement and muttered comments following Nettlesplash's question. Hawkwing felt the tightness in his chest. Did Echo Song know about the fire before it happened, and she kept it to herself? He tensed every muscle as though he was creeping up on prey as he listened to the medicine cat's reply.
I believe that the fire has burned out refers to Firestar's death, and not a real fire, Echo Song meowed. I don't think that Skystar—
This time it was Tiny Cloud who interrupted.
If this prophecy is about some cat with fire in their name, then maybe it refers to Firefern or Bouncefire.
Bouncefire puffed his chest out at the thought of being mentioned in a prophecy, while Firefern, looking disturbed, opened her jaws to reply. But Hawkwing couldn't hold himself in any longer. Before Firefern could speak, he sprang to his paws.
If you knew about the prophecy, he cried out to Echo Song, why didn't you warn any cat? You think it's just a coincidence that you received this prophecy on the morning of the Great Fire and they're not connected? That doesn't make any sense. StarClan warned you about the fire and— StarClan has always worked in mysterious ways, Echo Song cut in. By the time I awoke from the dream, it was already too late. When I came out of the Whispering Cave, I could smell smoke, and by the time the smoke reached our camp, the fire was already blazing. It was only moments later that you and the others returned with Duskpaw. Hawkwing, believe me, I understand how you feel, but not even a medicine cat can go back in time.
Her words had no more effect on Hawkwing than the cawing of rooks high in the branches of a tree.
That's unfair. Why would StarClan send a prophecy too late for Echo Song to do anything? Duskpaw needn't have died. What's the point of having prophecies if they can't prevent anything terrible?
He asked bitterly. Echo Song's voice grew gentle, and her beautiful eyes were full of compassion.
Hawkwing, I'm really sorry about what happened to your brother. It is a terrible tragedy. But this prophecy is not about him. How can it not be about him?
Hawkwing demanded, his heart pounding as if it would break out of his chest. His shoulder fur was bristling and he slid out his claws. He wanted to leap on Echo Song as if she were his enemy, and if she had not been standing above him on the rock pile, he might have done it.
The prophecy spoke of a fire, and Duskpaw died in one.
Hawkwing, that's enough! Sharpclaw stepped forward and gazed down at his son. Echo Song is our medicine cat. She deserves your respect. His sharp tones made Hawkwing feel embarrassed. He was too old to be scolded like that in front of the entire clan. He said no more. He could barely speak. His whole body seemed to burn with shame and anger.
Prophecies can't prevent every terrible thing, Echo Song explained. But they can certainly help prevent some terrible things. And if StarClan tells us that we must find Firestar's kin, then it's up to SkyClan to listen. Or who knows what might happen.
Her words fell into silence. Every cat in the clan had their gaze trained on her. Finally, Leafstar raised her tail and spoke into the silence.
I will consider sending a few cats on a quest to look for Firestar's kin, she announced. But before that, a patrol will go to the scene of the fire just in case there's anything in the embers.
And what if there's nothing to be found? Sharpclaw asked.
Then we will be sure that Echo Song's prophecy did not refer to the real fire, Leafstar responded. Sandynose, you will lead the patrol. Take Plumwillow and Hawkwing with you.
Hawkwing was startled to be chosen for the patrol. Surely Leafstar must be furious with me. Then he realized that his clan leader must want him of all cats to be certain that there was nothing important at the scene of the fire, and that the prophecy had nothing to do with Duskpaw's death. Leafstar dismissed the meeting, and the other cats began to disperse. Sandynose and Plumwillow came to join Hawkwing.
You haven't eaten or slept,
Sandynose meowed as he padded up.
We don't have to go right now, if you want some fresh kill and then take a nap.
No, I'm fine. Hawkwing's paws were itching to get moving. If we need to find the spark that remains, who is to say it won't blow away soon?
How do we know it hasn't blown away already?
Okay. Sandy Nose gave a brisk nod and led the way up the trail to the top of the gorge. As he followed, Hawkwing realized part of the reason why he had been so hostile to Echo Song. I want to believe that the prophecy was about the fire. Then it wouldn't be all my fault that Duskpaw died, because it would have been destined in the stars. But he realized, too, that even if that was true, it made no difference. Duskpaw is still dead.
I think the prophecy must have something to do with the fire,
Plumwillow meowed as the patrol set out across the scrubby grass toward the two-leg green place.
I mean, why would StarClan send us off to find the other clans when we're doing well right where we are?
True, Sandy Nose responded. That would be mouse-brained. Hawkwing remained quiet, barely listening to his clanmates' chatter. As they drew closer to the two-leg green place, he began to pick up traces of the terrible smell of burning. He flinched, needing to pause for a moment with his eyes tight shut, as all the memories of that dreadful day came rushing back. He could hear the anguished cries of the trapped cats, and almost see Duskpaw's scared face through the smoke. Forcing himself into motion again, Hawkwing caught up with his clanmates. When the two-leg green place came into sight, he could see that most of the debris from the fire had been cleared away, probably by Two Legs. The two-leg rock was gone, and so was the fallen tree branch. All that remained were a stretch of earth where the grass had burned away, part of the burned tree, and scorch marks on the trash can. The three cats padded over the site of the fire, carefully examining everything. Sandy Nose and Plumwillow went on discussing the prophecy, but Hawkwing wasn't interested. He was focused on finding something, anything that might be the spark that remains. But the search didn't take long, because there was hardly anything left to search.
There's nothing here but charred earth and a bad smell, Sandy Nose declared with a sigh. Echo Song is probably right. Yes, Plumwillow agreed. The prophecy must be about Firestar's kin, the other clan cats.
Hawkwing remained quiet. He was still unsure about the prophecy, and the image of Duskpaw, trapped and terrified, kept flashing into his head.
Let's go back,
Sandy Nose meowed.
Okay, and maybe we can pick up some prey on the way,
Plumwillow suggested.
Coming, Hawkwing?
Hawkwing shook his head.
No, you can go on without me. I'll follow you in a few moments.
As he watched his clanmates retreating in the direction of the gorge, Hawkwing reflected how strange it felt to be allowed to say that. I don't have to go back with them, because I'm not an apprentice anymore. It's okay for me to be out here alone. Once his companions had vanished, Hawkwing turned to face the stretch of scarred earth. Even though his brother was buried under the tree at the top of the gorge, Hawkwing felt closer to him here, the last place Duskpaw was alive. And it's a place he loved, because of all those scraps of two-leg food.
Duskpaw,
he mewed aloud, his voice thick with emotion.
I'm so sorry I didn't save you. I'm so sorry that you never got to be a warrior.
As Hawkwing stood there silently grieving, the scent of another cat drifted into his nose. Startled, he turned to see a strange cat only a tail length away. His heart pounded, and he twitched his ears, uncomfortable to realize he'd been overheard. How did he manage to creep up on me like that? The cat's scent must have been covered up by the smell from the smoke and fire, he thought, turning his attention to the intruder. He was a strong, muscular tom, with white fur broken up with black spots, and a long black tail. His expression was friendly as he dipped his head to Hawkwing, but this was a cat Hawkwing had never smelled or seen before.
Hi, he meowed. My name is Darktail. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm wondering if you're a clan cat.
A clan cat? For a moment Hawkwing was silent, not sure how to reply, or what this strange cat wanted. Why do you want to know?
I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, Darktail continued, glancing down as though embarrassed. But I heard you talking to your clanmates, and I couldn't help overhearing that you were talking to some cat who wasn't there. The fire was a terrible tragedy, wasn't it? Did you lose some cat you loved?
Hawkwing had begun to bristle when Darktail confirmed that he had overheard what he'd said to Duskpaw.
That was private.
But the White Tom's voice was so sympathetic that Hawkwing forced his shoulder fur to lie flat again.
Yes, I lost my brother, he replied.
I'm so sorry, Darktail meowed. You know, I was caught in that fire too.
Hawkwing's pads began to prickle with suspicion.
I didn't see you here. You don't look injured, he pointed out.
Well, I wasn't exactly in the fire, Darktail explained. I was resting in those bushes over there. He gestured with his tail.
Hawkwing looked to the bushes, which he knew he had walked past on his way to the two-leg rock. How had he not seen a sleeping rogue? Then he guessed that he'd been so worried about his clanmates, he just wasn't paying attention to anything else.
I breathed in a lot of smoke, Darktail continued. It made me weak and confused, and I even passed out for a while, he added, letting out a feeble cough. And I haven't been able to travel on because I can't breathe very well, and I get tired quickly when I move around. I was wondering, he paused, ducking his head in embarrassment.
What?
Hawkwing asked.
What does this cat want?
Well, I know that clan cats keep herbs for medicine, Darktail replied. Could you possibly give me something to help with my breathing? I've had trouble hunting because I'm so weak. If you could, I'd repay you for your kindness.
It was strange, but Hawkwing felt an odd connection to this newcomer. Darktail had been injured in the same fire that killed Duskpaw. He too had suffered because of two-leg foolishness. A sudden compulsion to help pricked every hair on his pelt. Somehow, Hawkwing thought, it would be like fighting the fire all over again, and this time he could win. I can't take a strange cat into camp, but maybe I can get Echo Song to bring him some herbs to help him. Surely she'll do that, when Darktail was injured in the same fire that killed Duskpaw.
I'll go and get a medicine cat who might be able to help you, he told Darktail.
I'll come with you, the White Tom responded instantly.
No, you should stay here, Hawkwing objected. It's too far for an injured cat.
He also didn't want to bring a strange cat onto clan territory without permission, but Darktail didn't need to know that.
Please, I must come with you, Darktail insisted, moving toward Hawkwing with wide, pleading eyes.
Hawkwing stepped back, startled. Darktail dipped his head.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be demanding. It's just, I can't bear to stay alone among the charred remains anymore. It's too terrible to be here with the smell and the memory. He choked and went on. The memory of the horrible things that happened. I only stayed because I heard there were clan cats around here, and I hoped to meet one of you. I'm just so relieved to find you. But don't worry, I won't come into your camp unless I'm invited.
Hawkwing took in the strange cat's serious, hopeful expression.
I understand,
he murmured finally.
Surely no cat can take issue with my showing him to our border, not after what he's been through.
Side by side, the two cats headed toward the gorge. Hawkwing set a slow pace because of Darktail's breathing problems, but even so, the White Tom had to stop 2 or 3 times to catch his breath.
I'm glad I found him,
Hawkwing thought, as they padded into the undergrowth at the top of the gorge.
We went back to the two-leg green place looking for clues about the prophecy, and I found a cat looking for help.
Excitement tingled through Hawkwing from ears to tail tip.
Maybe Darktail is a clue. Maybe he is the spark that remains, and I was meant to find him.
Stay here, he told Darktail when they reached the edge of the cliff.
I'll go and find our medicine cat.
He felt embarrassed at the thought of seeking out Echo Song so soon after arguing with her at the rock pile, but he knew it had to be done. Echo Song was in her den, sorting out herbs, while Cloud Mist slept curled up in her mossy nest. The medicine cat looked up as Hawkwing paused at the entrance to the den.
Hi, Hawkwing, she mewed. Can I help you?
If she was still upset about their argument, she didn't show it, greeting Hawkwing with the same calm friendliness she showed to every cat. Hawkwing's embarrassment faded.
I stayed behind at the green place after the others left, he told Echo Song, and I met a strange cat there. He was injured in the fire too, and he doesn't have a clan to take care of him. I thought he might be somehow connected to the prophecy.
Echo Song's green eyes narrowed thoughtfully, but all she said was, "How was he injured?" "He breathed in too much smoke." "Colt's foot for that," Echo Song murmured, sorting through her herbs until she found some of the dried flowers. "Come on," she added, picking up 2 stems in her jaws. "Show me where he is." Darktail was waiting where Hawkwing had left him, under a tree at the top of the gorge. Echo Song looked wary as she approached him and set the colt's foot down in front of him. "Eat one now," she told him with a dip of her head, "and the other one at sun-high."
"Thank you," Darktail meowed, swallowing the first stem. "It's great how you clan cats look after each other. It must really make a difference being part of a clan."
"How do you know about the clans?" Echo Song asked, her eyes narrowing.
"When I was a young cat, I knew some groups of cats who lived in a forest," Darktail replied. "They all had their own territory, and each cat had its own duties, and they had a special cat who healed them."
"So you've met clan cats?" Echo Song asked, her ears perking up with excitement and curiosity. "You've seen them before?"
"Sure I have. All the clans had different names, and I think one of them was called something like Thunder Clan."
Hawkwing's belly lurched as the White Tom named Firestar's clan.
He really must be part of the prophecy.
He listened as Echo Song, intensely interested now, went on questioning the newcomer. Darktail certainly seemed to know a lot about the clans, as much as any loner would know who had spent some time living near them. Hawkwing could tell that Echo Song suspected he might be able to help SkyClan find Firestar's kin. And he realized that perhaps both meanings of the prophecy were correct. Maybe Darktail and ThunderClan are both the spark that remains. The fire led me to Darktail, and now Darktail is going to lead us to Firestar's kin. Finally, Echo Song turned to Hawkwing. "Go and ask Leafstar to come up here," she ordered him. As he headed down the trail toward Leafstar's den, Hawkwing's fur fluffed up with importance at the thought that he was fetching the clan leader to talk to a cat that he had brought back from the site of the fire. When he reached Leafstar's den, his father, Sharpclaw, was there with her. The 2 cats were talking quietly with their heads close together, and Hawkwing guessed that they were discussing what to do about the prophecy. He waited quietly by the entrance until Leafstar looked up and noticed him. "Yes, Hawkwing?" she mewed. "What can I do for you?" Tipping his head politely, Hawkwing explained how he had met Darktail and how Echo Song was talking to the stranger at the top of the gorge. "He seems to know a lot about the clans," he finished. "Echo Song thinks you should hear what he has to say." Leafstar nodded. "Of course. This sounds interesting." "I'll come with you," Sharpclaw added. Hawkwing was pleased that his father wanted to talk to the newcomer as well. Maybe he'll finally think that I've done something right. Darktail was sitting under the same tree when Hawkwing returned with the clan leader and deputy. Echo Song was pacing to and fro a couple of tail lengths away, her expression deeply thoughtful. She halted and turned back to Darktail when Leafstar appeared. "Tell Leafstar what you told me," she directed. Darktail dipped his head respectfully to the clan leader and repeated what he had said earlier about the clans. "Thank you, Darktail," Leafstar meowed when he had finished. Her expression was warm. "Please come down into the camp and share our prey. Our hunting patrols have just returned, and there's plenty for every cat. Then you can spend the night in the medicine cat's den and get some rest." She paused, then added, "If what you say is true, then you have given us all a very great gift." Leafstar would never invite Darktail into camp unless she thought he could be a great help to SkyClan. In spite of his grief about his brother, Hawkwing felt every hair on his pelt tingle with pride that he had brought something useful back from the site of the fire. As he padded down the trail into the gorge, bringing up the rear behind his father, Hawkwing suddenly felt shaky with exhaustion, and his belly was bawling for food. Until then, the excitement of the morning, of discovering Darktail, had driven his night's vigil and his hunger out of his mind. But now he could feel every moment that he had stayed awake. "I could fall asleep on my paws if I wasn't starving." Once he reached the camp, he split off from Darktail and the others, then bounded over to the fresh kill pile and picked out a juicy-looking mouse, gulping it down in huge mouthfuls. Then, with a nod at the injured cat, he headed for his new nest in the warrior's den. As he curled up and closed his eyes, he felt a tiny hint of hope for the first time in days, like a light flickering in the depths of a dark forest.